Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into equestrian at the college level. My guest today is Michael Dowling. He is the coach for equestrian at Centenary University. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so usually I start my guests where they went to college. So where'd you go to school?
So my undergraduate work I did at Fairfield University in Connecticut, where I studied international relations and art.
Wow.
And got my bachelor's degree there, and then I went to graduate school in England, where I studied Russian and African foreign policy.
Oh my God.
Far cry from horses.
So let's go back into high school first before we get to equestrian. When did you start thinking about going to college? Was it freshman year of high school, senior year of high school, or did you always think about this is it?
I think for my freshman year, I received the Barron's Guide to Colleges from my father for Christmas as a freshman in high school. So it was a 4-year process of looking at schools. And I ended up going to Fairfield partially because it was located in an area very close to a very famous hunt club where they did a lot of riding. There was a couple of Olympic riders out of that facility. So I wanted to be able to still ride horses while I was in college getting an education.
So is that what you did at Fairfield?
At Fairfield, I worked, and I rode at the Fairfield Hunt Club outside of Greenwich, Connecticut, and then I ended up going to school, obviously, for art and politics.
So now you're at Fairfield. What's it like? Tell me, is the experience of college what you thought it would be?
I think I certainly would probably do it a little differently now. Fairfield was a small school. It academically was a great experience. I met great people there. It certainly prepared me for life. I ended up being a Rotary Scholar to go to grad school from there, so they did a great job of preparing me to go to graduate school. My riding was really sort of, as a competitive rider, was sort of on the back burner. I did work at the Fairfield Hunt Club, but I worked there. I wasn't really showing or riding horses very much while I was in college. During the summers, I took some opportunities. I worked and taught camps and did things like that, where I started really developing professional skills while I was still in school. But the academic experience at Fairfield was great, and I had a good time. Good enough that I decided I didn't really want to go out into the workforce. I said, I think I need to do this a little more. I need to go to graduate school before I really get out there. And so then I went forward and moved over to England and went to grad school.
So now, how does one go from graduating and ends up as the coach at Centenary University doing equestrian?
I got back to the United States after grad school and decided that it was probably, I would like to do something a little enjoyable, something to do with my passion for the horses. So I was riding horses for a while. In the meantime, my family, saying it's time to get a real job, and I kept postponing reality. I ended up working a family business for a bit and continued to show horses and ride, and I purchased a farm with my cousin I was around 23, 24 years old, and ran a show operation for show horses where we competed on the East Coast from Florida during the winters up through the Northeast all year. And I did that for like 15 years, competing and training and coaching people. Went to work for a family in the fashion industry who had quite a few horses and had access to a lot of things and a lot of horses. And when that young lady went away to college, I said, okay, I think I need to settle down, and I decided to work in education.
Wow.
So I had some family members that were educators, and the idea of settling and having something consistent was very appealing after living for 15 years on the road out of a suitcase. So I had clinicked and done some clinics at Centenary. Back then it was Centenary College. And I had taught their riding team a couple times through a connection, a friend of mine. And they always said, listen, if you ever are interested in working, you want to entertain this, come see us.
Wow.
So I said, okay, and I went in and I took a job as a full-time faculty member and was able to share all my experiences that I've had in the past 15 years, showing myself and competing and training, and had an opportunity to share that with people that were going to school to do this as a career.
Wow.
And at that point, part of the deal was that I had to coach the team, which was actually very interesting to me. I really was excited about that. Riding's a very individual sport, and the idea of people coming together and doing it as a team is really that's a new thing, because people compete as individuals in riding for the most part.
So now let's get into the actual equestrian at the college level. What's it all about? How does it actually work at the college level?
So there are a couple of different avenues that a student can take that want to pursue collegiate riding. They can go it's the NCEA, through the NCAA schools. It's an emerging sport. It is a women's only sport in the NCEA. There are roughly 18, 20 schools probably in the United States that have NCEA riding teams. And then there's also the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association, which is another avenue that they can take. There are almost 400 or 500 schools, I think, that do the IHSA, as we call it, Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. And they range from very small student-run club sports to schools that have NCEA programs as well as intercollegiate programs. So depending on the level and the person's level of commitment, the riders that are interested in getting on an NCEA team, they have to go on the clearinghouse as sophomores in high school. They've got to really have a very aggressive track for those schools to actually pursue them and recruit. They have to go through a lot of different avenues along the way to get on one of those teams. Those teams also do have like walk-on spots for athletes that decide they want to, at the last minute they may say, hey, listen, I'm going to Auburn, and say they might want to just, if they have a spot, they might be able to walk on. Those are difficult to get, far and few between. The IHSA, on the other hand, depending on the school, and again, there's hundreds of schools that have IHSA programs across the country, and they can be small Ivy League schools that have just club sport, to a school like Penn State that might have close to 100 kids on their team.
Wow.
Centenary, where I teach, we have roughly 50 kids, which is a big team for a very small school with roughly 2,500 undergrads.
Now, do you compete against all those other schools like at Penn State?
Yes. So you compete at a regional level and then a zone level, and then the top riders that come out of those final competitions move on to the national level. So we compete against everything from an Ivy League school to schools with 50,000 students.
Wow.
So.
And it's both men's and women's in this.
And IHSA is men and women, correct. So if you're a young man looking to go to school and ride, you wouldn't go to an NCAA school. You'd go to a school with an IHSA program.
And is there any monies at the college level for equestrian, or no?
So there is money in terms of the NCEA. They offer scholarships. I mean, these are considered to be elite athletes, no different than football players. There's a lot of financial incentives. Not quite as much, I don't think, for the women's athletes as NCAA riders, but they receive a lot of wonderful benefits, from tutoring services to, therapies and, lots of, athletic services that you probably won't find in a club sport. So some students will find that to be very attractive, along with that goes the fact that these, they're really committed to the schools. They probably are going to the gym every single day. They're working out. It's a very regimented agenda. The IHSA and some schools have very strong programs with a lot of commitment. Some of them are a little less committed in their club sports run by students, and it's just a really nice way for students to be able to get to ride in college, regardless of their level, where the NCAA riders all ride at what we would consider the open level, the top level.
Yeah.
The IHSA programs offer an entry level where riders come in that maybe have never ridden in the past, or they're just beginner riders walking and trotting. They're not jumping jumps or competing at that level, which is super nice because it gives everybody an opportunity to compete. And
But
that's a
is there monies for them as well, or
and
no? Just
there are
academic
some
money for the school?
There are some schools that will offer some incentives, financial incentives. I know many schools probably go in under they'll receive some kind of academic scholarship based on merit. And in my particular program, most of the students are able to get academic financing and additional.
Now,
monies.
is it a club sport where the kids have to pay for the club sport?
And again, it varies from team to team. Some schools actually pay for when they go to the competitions, they pay for the competition entry fees, they pay for their membership fees, and that really varies from school to school. Usually by the time they get to the final competitions, for instance, again, from my experience in our school, at Centenary, the school actually pays airfare and their hotels and all their expenses and their entries. When we're competing at a local level at home, the students are responsible for their membership fee, which is nominal, $50 or something to that effect. But then there are schools that also have, great financial backing, and they pay for everything for the students.
Now, how do you find these students? I mean, do you go to these farms and go find people that are riding on horses, or how do you look for them?
Yeah, I was driving down the road, I see a farm and say, let me see if I can find some good riding potential student. For the most part, there are different programs now that are offered, one of which is what they call the CPI, which is the College Preparatory Invitational. And those are for high school students that are college-bound, looking to pursue riding in a competitive way. And they are offered in Florida, California, Texas. So it's a really nice recruiting tool for us. Schools will go, and usually on the first day they'll do a clinic where they actually coach the high school students, and these are college coaches from teams that will go. They'll give them sort of a warm-up day where they give them some instruction. These riders come, they arrive, they're unfamiliar with the horses that they are put on. They get on an unfamiliar horse that they've never sat on, and they essentially get a lesson in a clinic form with a group of other riders. Then the next day, they'll do sort of a mock competition where they draw a random horse, essentially out of a hat, very random, and it could be a 6'3" guy, and he gets a little horse, and he's got to figure out how to ride that horse around a course of jumps with no practice, no warm-up or anything. So it's really about the unfamiliar. So it's really much more challenging than just getting on and riding a horse that you're familiar with and going into competition.
Sure.
So that adds a whole different dimension to it. But in terms of recruiting, that College Prep Invitational is one example of a great way to basically go watch some of these high school students and say, that young lady she's got a lot of potential, and then we can reach out to them and we talk to them about this, what our schools offer. With most of the IHSA riders, we find that they're looking to complement their academic goals and what they are looking to do. We have students that are interested in going on to med school or vet school, and they just want to continue to ride for fun, not compete at the collegiate level, which is fantastic.
Sure.
Then we also have students. We have an equine program at Centenary University, so for that reason, students might want to come to pursue something professionally in the equine industry. So it goes, certainly very nicely. They get to compete on horses while they're pursuing their career.
And what do you do once you get into equine? What are you doing after college? What are some of the jobs that these kids end up with?
So they're not all just riding positions. They could be interested in going into communications or working on social media, writing for equine publications. We have students that do internships with different industry publications. There are students that pursue vet school. They go on, or they study equine science and go into research, nutrition, things like that. We have students that go on to pursue a riding career for themselves. Maybe they have set their sights on riding at an Olympic level or a Grand Prix level. So they'll concentrate on actually the riding and training aspect of it. Many of these equine programs have a variety of different concentrations under the big umbrella.
Yeah.
So, communications, science, equine business, where they might go in to some aspect of business with a, in the equine field.
Now, do you find a lot of students that do equestrian, they have private coaches, private locations that they go to? Is
Yes.
that something that they do, that they're
Yes.
doing?
Most of the riders that do come with riding experience in the show world, in the competition ring, they come with with experience with a trainer. And on the other side of this, I have my own training business. So I deal with young people that are preparing to go to college, men and women. Some of the women will go on to ride for NCAA schools, and some of the students will go and ride at colleges with an IHSA program. So I very much immersed in both aspects of it.
Yeah.
So just like anything else, there's a lot of networking that goes on, and people will say, oh, Michael, I heard that so and so is interested in coming to this university, and they ride with you outside of school. Tell me a little bit about them. I'll say, oh, that's, he or she rides great. They're team players. And so some of the recruiting gets done that way. Like in any other field, but there's a lot more of that because you're out competing throughout the year, and looking at schools is a very important part of these young people's lives. Most of them are all college bound, and they want to know how can I continue to ride, have that riding experience, and go to a school where I can get
Now,
my
is
degree.
it the same thing as any other sport? Do you have is there a fall season, a spring season? What happens when a student gets to Centenary University? What happens to that student when they start riding?
So we start in September, and it is both fall and spring, the season itself. The first fall semester we spend going to our local competitions where you accrue points as individual riders as well as the teams accrue points. In the spring semester, we come back. They have regular break. During their winter break, some of the students, go home, they ride, they compete. The riding world sort of transitions down to Florida at the higher levels. So some of the students will go down and work. We have many students that actually over their winter break take 4 weeks and they go down to Florida to either work and or ride. Mm-hmm. Then we come back in the spring semester, and they will finish up the local competitions, and then we prepare to go to the regionals, and then the top riders in schools then move on to zones and then to nationals, which took place last week.
Oh,
we just finished
May, usually every May.
The very beginning of May, and then during the summer, the students go home, and many of them go out, they ride, they do internships, they take jobs. We spend a lot of time placing our students in places. The students will come to us and say, I want to ride, I want to go work, I want to work on managing, I want to go to a breeding farm and work with foals, or so because we have that concentration at our school as well, which not all schools have, we're really very much invested in helping our students find positions where they can continue to pursue the horses.
Now, is it the same thing in like other sports? You need certain grades to get into the school and so on.
Yes.
What type of high school student are you looking at for riding at the college level?
Well, I'm sure as in most institutions, they do have to have a certain GPA. As any athlete needs to maintain a GPA in order to stay on a team. In terms of the academics, our students are admitted based on their academic performance throughout school. So you could be a great rider if you don't have, you don't really have a great academic, background. You're going to struggle getting into any program. And again, we have IHSA schools have teams, everywhere from a community college to your top colleges and universities in the country. So, for the most part, we're looking at their regular academic status in terms of whether they're going to come in. Some of the most highly, recruited riders, certainly are probably coming in with more, a little more weight placed in their athletic performance coming forward. But for the most part, in schools that have IHSA teams, it's really based on their academic merit. Very few students are going to be top riders and get in with bad grades.
And how about practice time at the college level? Is it like other sports, you do a few hours every day? How does it work?
And every program differs. I mean, in most programs, there might be some workout regimes and requirements, like you have to go to the gym so many days a week. And then in our program, all of the students, they have a formal practice on Fridays, and they ride throughout the week in addition to the formal practice. We come together, the coaches will get together, and we work with the students and prepare them for the show competitions on Fridays, and that's how we work in our program. Many of the schools do that, and some of the other schools that have smaller programs, or they have a much more select team where, say, only 8 riders compete, they might have more intense practice schedules, but because we have a very large team, in order to accommodate them, they all practice on one day. And we have other teams also at Centenary. We have other teams in addition to the IHSA. So we have what they call the IDA, which is the Dressage Association, Intercollegiate Dressage Association. We have the Hunter Jumper team, and they go to horse shows also, but they go on practiced and rehearsed horses that the school owns. Our school owns 100 horses. It's a very big program. And then we have an ANRC program that's another team that has specific goals for open level riders at the top.
So now, what are some of the competitions? It's not horse racing like you would see in the Kentucky Derby.
That's over that weekend.
What type of events do you actually get at the college level?
So in college, the riders, for the most part, that we're talking about in our program are what we call hunt seat riders, and they're showing horses both on the flat where they walk, trot, and canter, and that's one class, and then they compete over fences, and that's what we call show jumping, or it's based on equitation, which is based on the rider's ability to affect the horse and their position. So it's a little bit about style and efficacy and how they can affect the horse and so forth. They also will have, again, entry-level riders that are just starting out and learning to just walk and trot. So that goes right up to the open level where they're competing over fences. They're also Western riding. There are schools that have Western teams as well. And they also range from a very entry-level rider up to top reigning riders that compete at a national level.
And what is Western riding? You don't ride without a saddle or something?
No, Western, it's like, the old cowboys. You have a big Western saddle, and they don't jump. Western, jumping sort of goes back to historically hunting, fox hunting. So that's what we're doing in the hunt seat world, which is what I coach. But there are most of the schools, not most, I would say probably a good number of schools have Western programs as well. So you have a Western team and a hunt seat team.
Gotcha.
At the NCAA or NCEA level, they have on their team 50% of the riders are Western riders and 50% are hunt seat. Wow. And that's important for people to know, I think, because I think the hunt seat world, there's a lot of exposure to that. But we also have Western. We're just celebrating their 40th year in the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. So 40 years of Western riding, which is, that's a good amount of time. The hunt seat world, we celebrated our 50th anniversary the year before last. So it's been around for quite some time as a college opportunity.
So now, how do you find these athletes? Do you just walk around campus and looking for the biggest kids and say, "Hey, can you ride a horse?"
Or if you don't know how to ride a horse, can you come and learn? Again, many of the students they seek the colleges that have teams that they're interested in. Again, we go to college fairs, things like that CPI program, where we go and we actually look for riders and students that might be a good fit, academically and riding-wise, for the school. And then once we start, it's on a campus like Centenary's, where we only have, it's a small campus. The students find out, who are those people walking around in boots and breeches? They smell like a barn. And they're interested in, and we do have students that come and they have never ridden. They did not come to school to ride, and maybe they have a friend or someone's roommate or something that rides, and they'll come up and they'll say, "Hey, we want to give that a go." We love when we get new riders like that because they have no background, they have no information, and they're usually great learners, and they decide they want to get on the team, and we can put them into that entry level, which is pretty sweet for us when we can get somebody
Yeah.
like that.
Do you find a student athlete just out of the blue type of walk on and say hey, and then all of a sudden it's a pretty good athlete?
Occasionally, and I think in other schools, other coaches that I've spoken with, there are plenty of times they say, well, so and so was a dancer, or that person was a skater. People where they really concentrate on body control and position. People that have a background in training in those sort of athletic fields are usually, they can be good candidates to be good riders. But, a good athlete's a good athlete. I mean, there's certain people, myself not one of them, who can, they can pick up a tennis racket, a baseball bat, or get on a horse and just be talented.
Well, good. Well, we're coming to the end of our show. And usually I ask my guests, what advice do you want to give to the parents and the students that want to ride at the college level, didn't even know that you can ride at the college level? What advice do you want to give to those people out there?
Anthony, I think probably the best thing for these people to do is start early, looking at schools. I work with my own clients outside of the university, and they start really early now. I mean, it's like shopping. You're looking for a great service and a good fit. College is business, so you go online, you check these different schools out, go to their open houses. There are programs in our school. We can have students come, they can stay over, they come, they watch a practice, they get a little taste for the student life, they sit in on classes, they might come to some of our competitions, go and watch what goes on in the barn, watch some of the practices, the riding lessons, and see if the coach looks like a good fit. And we want the students to be happy and comfortable, and that's going to help them perform better. They're better athletes when everything is very cohesive. They strive harder when it's a good fit. So I think as a young person, speaking to parents and students that are looking to pursue riding, I think as an academician, I have to say, you really want to go where there's a good program academically for what it is that you're looking to achieve. And look at those schools with good academic programs, and then look at the riding and say, hey, listen, they've got a great riding team, or I know the coach of that team, or maybe they talk to their trainer, and their trainer says, oh, they reach out to us, and we say, I think this would be a great place for so-and-so. But I think starting early on, I did a college fair up in Syracuse this weekend, and we had a couple kids that were in 6th and 7th grade, and at first I'm scratching my head thinking, and they ask, what's tuition? I'm like, well, by the time you come here, I can't really tell you. You're like 10 years away. But I'm like, well, they certainly are starting out early. But you go and you look at a campus and you say, wow, I want to go to school here someday, and there's nothing wrong with starting when you're young and saying, I think it's a great fit, research it. We have students that I followed, for their high school career that come to Centenary that I watched maybe as a freshman. They came up to me at a horse show. They said, hey, I'm interested in coming to your school. And, they'll stay in touch, and I'll watch them at horse shows or finals that they do on their own. And, by the time they come to me, we already have a good rapport.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.